Hello, Xers and interwebers. Welcome to another episode of Naive in the 90s, the podcast. My name is Emily, and I'm your host. I was a 70s baby, an 80s kid, and a 90s troublemaker. Today, we're going to deep dive into one of the fun passages of my book, Naive in the 90s. So, without further ado, let's just get into it. So we're going to do things a little bit different this week. As you can tell, I just am kind of throwing darts at the dartboard and hoping something happens. Like something hits somewhere. No reason really other than I have a squirrel brain, and this whole Naive in the 90s thing just kind of snowballed and happened, and I didn't really put a plan together. I just kind of started doing, and it really isn't, I'm sure professional podcasters are losing their mind if they ever hear it, like totally losing it, because I don't have backup episodes. I talk about, equipment going wrong and like whatever, and I know the more seasoned people, that's not how they do it. And that's fine for them. I just personally, this is kind of a therapeutic journey and a nostalgic journey for me. This isn't really about the views or monetizing or the reach or whatever, although all of that would be fantastic, of course. That isn't what this is about. This is actually about connecting with my younger self and my inner teenager and young adult who wasn't treated very well. So by myself, by others. So that's what this journey is. And so sometimes I'm going to talk about TV shows or movies that I like, and sometimes I'm going to talk about toys from the 80s or the 90s, or experiences from the 80s or 90s that don't necessarily have anything to do with anything or anyone, or that anyone else even understands. And I've been struggling with this because I'm like, oh, what if my content isn't relatable? Or what if this, or what if that? And when it comes down to it, it doesn't matter. Even if it's not relatable to some people, or even interesting to others, that's fine, because this is my journey and my story and my memories. And it's fantastic to have people to join me or to listen and learn something, or just whatever. That's great, but really my goal here is just to revisit things. And that includes the time and experience, but also, people from my past who super cool I've reconnected to through this whole experience. But anyways, now that I've babbled, I just want to say for this episode, we are going to do things a little bit different. Usually I would, read a short passage from the book and then talk about something that is relevant to the times, whether it be growing up in the 80s, because I was an 80s kid and a 90s teen, or talking about, things that happened in the book and how they relate to now or whatever. This time around, and I have done a couple episodes now where it's just nothing to do with the book and just, thoughts and experiences of the time. But this one, I'm going to read a full passage from the book, and then I'm going to go through it, because honestly, that is part of the reason that I started the podcast, was to be able to go through the book and, kind of dissect it and add my author's notes, basically. Because when I wrote all of this stuff, I was 15, 16, 17, and a lot has changed. And even though I did do an opening letter and an ending letter, it was kind of they were both kind of generalized. Um, there are specifics in the book that I do want to address more and specifically. So, yeah. This episode, we're gonna read a passage and then I'm just gonna kind of talk about it. And, yeah, so that's it. So, thank you. Thank you for being here and for listening and for being interested and any of that. So, okay, let's get on with it. May 1st, 1994, Sunday. So much has happened. It's so crazy. Yesterday, I was going to the Daffodil Festival with James, Chad, Kyle, and Dave. We got there and decided not to stay because it sucked. It wasn't exactly a nice day out either, so not much going on there anyways. We ended up going to the Overflow. Chad was meeting us there later. I'd like to add here, I was stoned and drunk off my ass. Of course, just my luck, Kyle and Dave decided to hike the hard way up, the rocks way. Not fun. I fell once and now I have a huge bruise on my knee and on my thigh. But we made it. Evan and Paul were already there with some freak girl I do not like very much. She was wicked obnoxious. Chad showed up and Paul decided to hand out trips. I don't do that. Well, everyone but me and Dave were doing it. Not actually sure why he didn't now that I think about it. But anyways, more freaks came up and James was totally wasted. And when he's like that, he gets really stupid, almost intolerable. All fucking horny and touchy-feely, not knowing what personal space is at all. Plus, he's a spitting close talker. Throw in the drunk googly eyes and yuck. So I told him to please leave me alone. After all, I'm not his girlfriend anymore. Chad, Kyle, and Dave went to the edge to watch the fireworks. And James was talking to Evan. So I went over to the guys and sat next to Kyle. Well, he's a little grope boy. I didn't really mind. It was pretty harmless. I definitely didn't get the tingles from him like Dave. I think I would have kissed him if so many people weren't around, just to see. But nah, he's just not what I want. I ended up trading spaces, so I was next to Dave. He and I started messing around, right there on the mountain, in the dark, on the rock, because he had this big hole in his pants. Very convenient. James ended up coming over, and Kyle and Chad decided to climb the tree behind us and throw branches down. Because why not, I guess? Well, one hit me right in the head, and James flipped out. When Chad came down the tree, James swung at him, and then they started to fight. In the confusion, and totally my own stupid fault, I got punched by James. It was totally an accident, and wasn't even that hard. Finally, they stopped. No one got hurt, and they made up. But I was pissed. James was acting really fucking stupid. He ended up feeling bad about Chad. While we were sitting there, talking it out, about 10 minutes after the thing, that's when Chad mentioned how I got hit in the shovel and not him like James thought. James just put his head down and closed his eyes. Like, shut down. It was really freaky. I tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't respond at all. So I left him alone. I went to talk to Dave and Luke, who I might add here also had very wandering hands. Yuck. But then I went back to James because he hadn't moved and we may not be a thing anymore, but I was still worried about him. So I go, "Are you okay?" He looked up at me and my goodness, he was crying. He goes, "I can't believe I hit you." I hugged him, telling him it was okay, and I knew he didn't mean it. It was an accident. I was in the way. But he just kept crying and saying there was no excuse. I don't ever deserve to get hit by anyone, and of all people, him. We just hugged for about 10 minutes. Then he started to calm down, so I left him to regain himself. It seemed that everything with all that was good, so the partying continued. Later, I just didn't want him to touch me and grope at me. He was just so drunk and gross. I mean, he was wasted and cross-eyed. Plus, we aren't together anymore, so I have every right to say no. Well, he flipped out and started yelling at me, saying he does all this shit for me, like rides and stuff. That I'm leading him on because I just want to whore it up with other guys when he's just sitting there, the nice guy, waiting for me. I was like, fuck you, asshole. I mean, how dare he? We broke up, and even if we didn't, if I don't want him to grope me, that's my choice. Why does he think he has say over my body more than I do? And what if he gives me rides? Am I a hooker who gets paid in rides or something? No. I have plenty of friends who give me rides. I don't see them trying to force or shame me into anything sexual. He makes me so mad, and he wonders why I don't want to be with him. It goes well beyond what's going on with Dave. It's because of him and how he acts. Well, we had to leave because we had to hike down the normal trail, and it takes like 15 minutes. So Dave, James, and I headed on down the mountain. Dave and I groped all the way down. Yes, that's right. Hiking and groping all the way down a dark mountain. It was fabulous. It was my choice, and it made me feel better. Stupid James. On the way home in the car, James was driving. I was in the front, and Dave was sitting behind me. He went under my jacket from behind. James couldn't tell a thing, or at least was too drunk and fucked up to notice. Well, we got to my house, and Dave got out of the back so he could hop into the front seat. And damn was his dick out of his pants and huge. Oh, baby, I wanted him. Right there, right then. Well, we pretended to talk for a few minutes so that I could get a handle on things. Then he got into the car, and I went inside, both with huge smiles on our faces. Stupid James just waved goodbye. He showed up today to apologize about everything that happened between us on the mountain. I'm so confused. I love him. No, I loved him. And I don't want to hurt him. Yet I think I'm actually falling for Dave. For real. I don't know. Ugh. While we were still on the mountain, I went over to Dave at one point and I go, I got a joke for you. He goes, okay. There's 3 types of orgasms. The positive, oh yes, the negative, oh no, and the fake, oh Dave, oh Dave. He just smiled that magic smile and goes, I don't know about you, little girl. You'll find out. Yes, I sure hope so. Oh shit, I almost forgot. James and a bunch of our friends are going to see Pink Floyd in Massachusetts in a couple weeks. He got an extra ticket for me. But it's on a school night, so of course my parents said no. Well, actually, they said absolutely not. It's so lame. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that I am lucky enough to be around for and to have someone ask me to go. This should have been an experience I would never forget. Now it'll be something I'll never forgive my parents for making me miss. Like, how can they do this? At least Dave isn't going. Maybe we can find something to do to amuse ourselves. Okay, so this passage is actually the very first one I read when I refound my diaries, which was like 20 years or so after all of this happened. Actually, a little bit more than 20 years. So to say that I didn't remember it was, yes, I did not remember this passage. I actually didn't remember the incident until I read it. And then it was like a movie montage, I swear. Like all of these memories of this night came flooding back, which is a weird experience, to be honest. And my husband was there with me when I found the diaries and when I read this. And he also was like, wow, that's a lot. Because it is. But it also is very representative of how we were in the 90s and as teenagers. Like, this was an average weekend night. Like, this is just what we did after school on Friday, we would get alcohol in some way, and usually it was pretty easy to do. Back then, IDs or, like driver's license and whatnot were very easy to fake. And I mean, like, very, very easy. I know a bunch of people who needed them because some people just didn't even need them. Like they'd go to the package store and the person working there would just assume that they were of age, or they just didn't care. I don't really know which one. Um, but yeah, so people would get fake IDs and it would be super, super easy because there wasn't any type of like, special papering. There wasn't, holograms. I think maybe senior year, our state may have gotten like a small little hologram in the corner, but I'm not 100% positive. I do know there were a bunch of people that had real IDs and they just sliced the laminate where the picture was and took the picture out and then added their picture. And that worked very well. Or they would copy out of state ones that were a little bit like lower quality. I remember a lot of like Tennessee and like the Carolinas type IDs going around. Um, but yeah, so on Friday, and that's if people weren't partying on Thursday, because that also happened. But, Fridays we would leave school, and as soon as we walked out of school, we'd have a cigarette and lighter in hand. Like, that was just the way it was. At the end of our last period class, most of us would get it out, holding it, getting ready. Which is weird because, like, now you can't even smoke. Like, I don't smoke anymore. Cigarettes are gross. But, yeah, now you can't even, like, look at a cigarette on the property of our public schools. So that's weird. I mean, good because cigarettes are gross, again, and they're so toxic. But at the same time, we smoked like crazy. We couldn't smoke during school, um, unless you had a really cool teacher, which we did have some that were super cool about it, and they would just let us. But yeah, it was weird because we were in the middle of the times where like school had a smoking section, and then also a time where you weren't allowed to have cigarettes. Like, it was weird. I actually got a detention once for having a cigarette during a fire drill. I'm like, dude, we were outside. Who fucking cares? But apparently they did. So that was the beginning of the end, to be honest, because I didn't go to that detention. And then it turned in from a normal detention to a Saturday detention. And I didn't go to that. So they were like, hey, let's do an in school suspension if you're not going to show up, which in school suspension meant you went to a room. During my time at school, that was room 206, and like you knew if someone was in 206, they were a bad person. Like, bad kid. And I didn't go. I actually just didn't go back. So yeah. There was a lot happening. And that wasn't for a while. that was this passage is from the end of junior year, and that was that whole thing. My senior year, I lost my mind. I don't know what happened. Actually, I do know what happened. Boys and drinking and drugs. That's so, yeah. So back to the passage. Yeah, we went to the overflow, and if you've read the book or you have listened to other episodes of the podcast, you know that the overflow was our party spot. It wasn't the only party spot. There was also the pit and the cove, and then multiple houses, and we'd also rent motel rooms, but the overflow was the main place, and it was awesome. Like, I still think about it to this day, and my husband and I have actually driven to where it was, because now you can drive, because now there's houses there, and it's super sad. um, I wonder, now I kind of wonder where the kids these days party. Like, where do they go? Do kids still party nowadays? I mean, they have to, right? Like, right? I don't know. I mean, weed's legal now. People are looking at shrooms like, who cares? So, I don't know. I don't know what they do. But yeah, so we went to the overflow, and there was a nice trail up to what was a town watershed. And that was the normal hike up. It was not an in use watershed. So we would just, hike up. It took like 10-15 minutes. And it was awesome. It was just awesome. No one ever bothered us up there. Um, but yeah, this particular time, there was also another way to go up, and that was through the rocks and the waterfall. And it was dangerous, like, especially because most of us were under the influence, which, yikes. Um, but yeah, so we would party outside, we'd party at the overflow all the time. It was kind of like if you didn't, because we didn't have cell phones back then, and some people had beepers, but you needed to be around a phone for that to work. It wasn't like texting or like messaging. It was just, hey, give me a call at this place because here's a number. And it wasn't even like, hey, give me a call. It was just kind of like, here's a number, call it. Yeah, I remember going up that hard way a few times. I was not a very coordinated person, so I didn't, I tried not to do that because rocks, water, slippery, just under the influence. It was a bad mix. And I'm actually surprised that I didn't get hurt more or that other people didn't get hurt more because yikes. So, a thing that like kind of makes me cringe really bad. Well, one of the things, because there's definitely a few. One of the things that makes me cringe really bad with this particular passage is where I talk about how we get up, my friends and I get up to the top of the mountain, and there's some freak girl there that I did not like very much, that she was wicked obnoxious. Um, I just, that really sticks with me because I did end up being friends with her not long after that. And then we were, friends slash acquaintances, like good acquaintances. I wouldn't say friends. I would say, good acquaintances. But, we became pretty good acquaintances along the way. And even after high school, I would see her often. Around town. I would see her kids and she'd see my kids, and it was always really nice to see each other. Um, there was always big smiles, big hugs, and the courtesy talk of, someday we're gonna hang out, and of course we never did. But yeah, so I feel horrible that it is stuck in here, like in words in black and white forever, that I didn't like her. Especially because she did pass away, uh, uh, kind of recently. I mean, if I'm being honest, which was super sad. Um, but yeah, so, I hate that. I hate that. I hate that. So, there are a couple other parts in the book where I do say, someone's a bitch, or, I'm so mad at someone, or whatever. And I don't think that at the time. Obviously I did, but like, it was horrible because there is actually one passage where I'm like, oh, that bitch. And I had, let me think, 3 or 4 of my friends from back then who I let preview the book. And they were like, oh, it's awesome. I can't tell who's who, except, I think this is me, or like whatever. And then they'd be like, well, as long as I'm not the bitch. Like, uh, no, not all of them were. Most of them weren't. But one of them was. And I feel horrible because she's like a friend now. And, yeah, I'm like, oh no, of course not. Because I don't want to be like, oh yeah, I was so mad at you. I thought you were a bitch. Like, oh Lord. Even though I feel like I shouldn't be, hiding that, or, whatever. Because at the time I did. And I mean, in my teenage squirrel brain, I thought it was justified, which I'm sure it wasn't, because we were all just, doing our thing. Um, but yeah, so that's the one thing with this whole book thing that has kind of eaten at me, is that I did call a couple people some things, or said I didn't like some people, and when it comes down to it, it's actually not true. And and now I don't even feel comfortable telling them. And actually, in one part, I downright took out a name, and a couple sentences that were pretty identifying, not to anyone else, but who, the people who were involved. But I did take it out because I just was like, no, this is unnecessary, and this will bring up old stuff that has been, squashed a long time ago, and has been taken care of a long time ago. And like, I know it was, 20 plus years ago, and it really shouldn't matter because none of us are the same people. But at the same time, I'm just like, nope, I don't agree with my younger self, and I just don't want to stir that pot. So yeah, just remember, when you write things down, or you say things, like, that shit lives on forever. Like, and chances are, the probability of your thoughts and attitude changing about a situation are pretty high. And then you get to look back and be embarrassed and sad that you were kind of a judgmental prick. So, yeah. So, yeah, that's that. So part of the seriousness in this passage, even though it really is about partying and, just having a good time, and I guess exploring, who I am and who I like and all that, there are some things that just, they are serious, and I don't think I took them as serious. Well, I definitely didn't take them as serious back then as I do now. And when I reread all of this, or revisited all of this, there were some things that stuck out to me. So the first thing is, well, this isn't even a big deal. I mean, this isn't a serious thing, but it is a thing that stuck out, and even my husband doesn't know. Like, the answer to this. But I mentioned that everyone starts dropping acid up there, and we're all staying for however long, and we're all like, doing whatever. I don't do it because at that time I didn't. I only occasionally smoked pot at this point and drank like a lightweight, like very, very lightweight. But yeah, but in this passage, I'm like, I don't do it, makes sense. But I'm also like, oh, Dave doesn't do it, which makes no sense. Like, he and I both were like, what? Why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he have done that? Like, that was a pretty normal thing. I mean, full disclosure, he did a lot. Like, in school, out of school, just for fun, just at home, like, just it was happening a lot. So it was just that was a weird thing. That was one of the weird things that stuck out to me. But yes, so one of the serious things that happened was, there was a fight, or not even a fight, but a little scuffle in between Chad and James. And I ended up getting hit in the face, punched in the face by James. And it was, not a big deal at the time, and it really wasn't a big deal because it was 100% an accident. It was like a drunken accident. But the serious part is I just jumped into the situation. Like, I saw two guys that I cared about fighting, and without thinking, I jumped in the middle of them. And even though this is a normal reaction for a lot of people when they see stuff like this, I gotta say it's not smart, and specifically for the reason that happened. There's a fight happening, you jump in the middle of something, the odds of you getting hurt or collaterally damaged is a lot. It's pretty big, because when people are in a fight, especially when they're under the influence of anything, emotions are already running high. So it's super easy for accidents to happen. So I just, don't do that. Don't jump into it. But another major, there's two more things, and the two major serious things that I did want to address here. At the end of the passage, I talk about how after, this night of partying and this fight and more drinking and just acid and just all this stuff that's happening, it's time for me to go home. And back then I had like an 11 o'clock curfew. Maybe it was midnight at that point. It never, when I was living at home, went past midnight, like ever. So I had to go home. So we all get into the car, and when I say we all, it is myself, Dave, and James. And James was driving. And even in the passage, I talk about how he's wasted, and how he's so wasted he doesn't notice that Dave and I are literally fooling around right there in the car with him driving. I'm in the passenger seat. Dave's in the back. He's reaching in, up, and around things. And I casually am just like, oh yeah, James was so wasted, he didn't even notice. Like, oh my god, do you see the fucking problem there, ma'am? Like, someone was so wasted, first of all, wasted at all, to be driving you home is stupid. But then to be like, oh my god, and he's so wasted that he didn't even notice this stuff. And like I mentioned, he took acid before, I just can't, like, oh my god, how am I still alive? How are any of us still alive? And then also, maybe that's why so many of us aren't still alive, because we did dumb things like this. And it's just like, I can't express to you how upset I would be or how worried I would be if anyone in my life was in that situation, in a car with someone that was that heavily intoxicated. And I do mean heavily intoxicated, because he, as I mentioned also in the passage, he was a cross-eyed, spitty drunk. And that was going on. And it's very upsetting. It was poor choices made everywhere, and ugh. And then the other thing, the more serious thing I wanted to address, and I don't know if it's more serious, because getting into the car with someone who's drunk and on hallucinogenics is pretty fucking serious. But I would hope that that's not a widespread thing. I would hope that is an isolated incident among very little of the population, because oh god, it's so fucking dumb. But so the other thing I do want to talk about is how James and I also get into a fight that night before we leave, and it is about permission or consent, or maybe not permission or consent. Maybe it's more about obligation, maybe, or I don't know. But yeah, so James ends up being super, super drunk. We had a couple tender moments because he had gotten in that fight with Chad, and I had gotten, hit in the scuffle, and that made James remorseful and emotional. So we did have moments there. I remember specifically hugging him. I remember sitting there with him and his head on my shoulder, just bawling his eyes out. And I was with this guy for a year. We were friends for 2 years. I cared about him. I 100% cared about him at this point still. We weren't actually totally done. We were still kind of dating at this point. We were no longer exclusive, and we weren't boyfriend and girlfriend per se, but we still were in each other's lives, and we were still very significant. So to see someone hurting like that, it was upsetting to me. And so I was comforting to him. I was compassionate to him, and I don't know, maybe because I have been called flirty my whole life, and I've never really tried. It's just who I am. It's just my personality. When I was younger, I'm not anymore. I'm bitter and jaded now. But, when I was younger, I was a very bubbly person, and I was a very huggy person. I love to hug people, and I love to touch them and to be connected to them, and laugh and smile, and just this always came off as flirty, which fine. Fine. That's fine. So I'm sure I was flirty maybe with him, but then it turns into an argument between us, because he's like, hey, what the hell, I want more right now physically, and I'm like, hell fucking no. And it turns into, he starts getting upset about the fact that I do want to date other people. And I would like to point out, I did want to date other people. At this point in life, I had been a serial monogamous. I basically went from one boyfriend in 8th grade to another boyfriend in 8th grade to another one in 9th grade, which was pretty long term, and then right into months. It was only months. Right into James, and James and I were pretty serious pretty quickly, and like I said, at this point, it had been about a year or so. that we had, you know, a pretty deep relationship. And so um I did I did want to see what else was out there. And yes, I was infatuated at this point, maybe is the right word, with Dave, and we had started something at this point. But that's not that was if it wasn't Dave, and I don't want to take anything away from what Dave and I have, because it definitely was something special back then, and it was, continues to be. Like, we have 30 years of history, and we've been married for over 20 years now. We've got, 2 kids in their 20s, and so, like, it it it, it was partly him, but it was also that I had never really dated. I had never really, gotten to explore other people, and he yells about that and how I just want to whore it up with these other guys, and that wasn't it. Whoring it up was not it. Did I want to kiss some people? Sure. Did I want to touch some things? Absolutely. But even at that point, I definitely wasn't whoring around. I think I was still a virgin at that point, to be honest with you. Maybe not. I might have, maybe not. I'm pretty sure I was still at this point. But yeah, so, it wasn't the whoring as he liked to yell at me for. It was literally, I was just trying to, one of my best friends had died, and I was lost, and I was confused, and then life all of a sudden was finite. There was an end to it when I understood death before this, but not for someone my age, And so at that point, I wanted to explore life. It wasn't so much boys or relationships, or I just wanted to live my life and see what the world was. It was really kind of messed up, because his big thing was like, well, I drive you around places, I give you rides. So the rides were like to school or home from school, or, to his house where I was friends with his sister, Sarah, or, to the Overflow or the Pit or Motel 6 or wherever we were partying. And yeah, so in his wormy little brain, he thought that because he did this stuff for me, that made him the nice guy. And I've never been the type of person that's like, oh, no, he's a nice guy, so that must mean he's an asshole. I've always been like, because my husband's a nice guy. Like, he really is. He's genuinely a nice freaking guy. And I know a bunch of other really nice people, like nice guys. But rereading or revisiting this and seeing, where he was like, I'm here, the nice guy waiting for you. Oh boy, I was like, ooh, okay, sir. Here it is. Here's that nice guy trope. Here is the not nice guy claiming he's a nice guy, because it's not. He wasn't a nice guy. Anyone who's trying to pressure anyone into anything because they're a nice person to them is not nice. That is manipulative and just gross. It's gross. It's so gross. I mean, it was so common back then. Like, I can't even begin to tell you how common it was back then. But yeah, so that was kind of upsetting to read, and to visit or to revisit. And I definitely like that passage. Is definitely part of the reason that I actually made the book into a book, or my diaries into a book, because this happens so much. This kind of stuff that, well, I do stuff for you, so therefore you owe me. You owe me because I was nice to you. I did something for you, so therefore you now owe me. Like, that's so messed up. Like, it's so messed up, and it's something that we need to talk about because that's not how it works. Yeah, well, actually, no, that is how it has worked. It is not how it should work. And I just hope more people, more women, more girls, even boys, I mean, just everyone. I really hope that this is something that's changing because it's sad. It's really sad. And also that part of the passage, where I'm like, well, we aren't together anymore, so he doesn't have reign over my body or whatever, however I said it. That's very fucking true. Like, we weren't together. And the other part of that passage is, even if we were, just because you're with someone doesn't mean that they have the right to touch you, to the right to make you do anything. They don't have any right to you physically. No one ever has a right to you physically, and it's crazy that that's how we live and like how we've been living, and like we're still fighting that no, you don't own this. I mean, there's still some cultures and some religions where it's like the husband, because he's married to the wife, he can just rape her. And it is rape. If she doesn't want to have sex, if she doesn't want to be intimate with him, and he makes her do it out of wifely duty, that's fucking rape. Like, coercion and rape. And that's not okay. It's not okay. And this, I don't know, this passage just kind of brought all that up for me, because it's not okay. Just, that's it. That's the thought. Like, that's it. It's just not okay. Like, do fucking better, people. Like, holy shit. Ugh. Just another, like, weird side note. The joke that is in this passage, there's 3 types of orgasm. The positive, oh yes, the negative, oh no, and the fake, where you say, well, in there I said, oh Dave. But you just put in whoever's name. Let me tell you how funny I thought I was. Like, I heard that joke somewhere. I don't even remember where I heard it. It was somewhere in school, and I thought it was the funniest thing. And like, if you need to know one thing about me, it's I am a dad joke freak. Like, I love dad jokes. The cornier the better. So it's funny to hear that I was super corny even when I was like 16. I was still just, oh god, the biggest dork. But yeah, I actually remember telling him that. I remember hearing it in school, and then I remember telling him that, thinking I was that was me flirting. You know how I said I wasn't like a big flirter, but I was like bubbly and whatever. This is an example of me trying to flirt, was telling a horrible just corny joke. But I mean, it did work, because I do remember that smile that he had on his face, and I did find out. Yes, I did. And there definitely was no negative and no fake, because oh boy, yeah, good times. Like, oh, I can't even tell you what a good time we had. But yeah, so, and then I guess the only other thing to talk about here was, I do mention at the end of it about how James and a bunch of our friends are going to go see Pink Floyd, and how James had invited me and my parents had said that I couldn't go. And yeah, I was mad about it then. I was mad about it the day of the concert. Like, I saw them when they left. James was actually like, "Are you sure you can't go?" He's like, "You could just get in the car and we can just go and not worry about it." But I was too worried about the consequences. I was always worried about the consequences. That's a big difference between me and a lot of my friends. A lot of people will say, getting in trouble was never as bad as how good the memories of going out were. And I 100% believe that. But just me, I was a very paranoid person. I don't know if paranoid is the right word, but I was definitely a very cautious girl. My parents scared the crap out of me, I'll be honest with you. My dad already didn't like me. My mom was already moving on. So they, growing up, they had threatened me with, putting me into a convent a lot, and pretty much for any kind of anything that they didn't like, from my attitude to my fashion to my friends to going out. It was, the big threat was to go to a convent. And this is going to make me sound so vain, but they also told me that I was going to have to cut my hair short like a nun's if I went to a convent. And that really petrified me, because the one thing I liked about myself was my hair. It's the one thing that I've always liked, and only thing I've ever liked. And so the idea of having to go to a convent and go to basically church 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for an entire school year or longer, and have to cut my hair was just too much. And that fear of that just, it really made me not do a bunch of things. And if you've read the book, or if I was friends with you back then, I did do a bunch of things. I was not good. I was better than a lot, but I was not a good kid. Or I was a good kid. I was a fucking great kid. I was not the best teenager. But even so, actually, I was, comparatively to what was happening and everyone else, I was actually really good. But my parents, they threatened me with the convent. So even though I could have gone and saw Pink Floyd, and for free and with my friends, I didn't go, and I still regret it. Every time I hear a Pink Floyd song, that's what I think. Every time I see any album cover or any Pink Floyd art, the first thing I think is, man, I could have seen them. I could have seen them live. It's like a once in a lifetime thing, first it's Pink fucking Floyd, and second, they're not even together. And they're old, and I hate it. It bugs me so much. But yeah, so it's one of those things. I kind of feel like, as a parent, I'm like, yeah, watch what your kids do, make sure that they don't go somewhere inappropriate. But then the other side of me is like, hey kids, go to the concert. If there's a concert opportunity, go. Yeah, so, it's like the old meat suit understands, no, you shouldn't go. But my inner child is like, fuck yeah, go kids, go. So, and no, I am not endorsing any sort of don't listen to your parents or sneaking out. I'm just, kind of am. Just be safe. No matter what you do, go live your life, but be safe. Safe, please. Well, it was really fun to revisit what, although it was a little more dramatic than the average night out for a bunch of us from my hometown back in the early mid-90s, but it still is a pretty good representation of what was essentially a super fun time to be young, alive, and reckless. No wonder so many people are nostalgic for the 1990s. And the neat thing is, it's not just us from the time, but it's the younger generations too. Each day, something from the era seems to pop up in social media, in the stores, just everywhere. And it's like widespread. Cars from the time, school supplies, TV shows being brought back or rebooted, clothing and fashion in general, hairstyles, like legit, there are so many mullets around, like I can't, oh my god, I can't even believe it. And even things like clearly Canadian is back, like what? I so need a mountain raspberry one. Oh goodness, it was so good. I hope they're still good, because I can like taste it in my mind and like, and the cherry one, oh, so good. But I'd be so disappointed if they weren't the same. But yeah, you know what I wish they'd bring back? New York seltzer and Fruitopia. Oh my god. We actually had a Fruitopia soda machine in our cafeteria. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, so I think that's gonna pretty much do it for today. Thank you for getting nostalgic with me and just for being interested. It's really cool and I appreciate every single listen. So thank you. Thank you for joining me today for Naive in the 90s, the podcast. I hope you come back in 2 weeks for a new episode. Who knows what we'll do? So make sure to follow so you don't miss it. For questions, comments, feedback, or contributions to the conversation, send me a message at naiveinthe90s@gmail.com or connect with me on social media with the handle @naiveinthe90s. Find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and now Threads. Of course, don't forget to grab your copy of Naive in the 90s, the creative nonfiction book based on real-life diaries from the early and mid-90s. Follow along as a high schooler tries to navigate life, friends, relationship, and of course, the raddest era ever. And if you have read and enjoyed the book, please make sure to leave a review. Each and every one truly helps. Thanks again for joining. Hope to see you next time. Peace and love, my dudes.